On this episode of Same Name, Different Game, we start celebrating the 30th Manniversary. Hello and welcome to Same Name, Different Game. My name is Joe, and for the last several years here I have done multi-part series starting in the summer to talk about the anniversaries of major events in gaming history. Typically these have been console launches, but this year we're going to mix it up a little bit. We're going to do something a little different because 2017 just so happens to be the 30th birthday of one of the most loved and prolific franchises in gaming history and one of my personal favorites, Mega Man. This is the first episode of the Mega Manniversary, so let's get started with a little history. Known as Rockman in Japan, the first Mega Man game was released for the Nintendo Famicom in December of 1987. Mega Man the game was created by Takuro Fujiwara, a veteran of Capcom's arcade division who was also the man behind Ghosts and Goblins and Bionic Commando. He had his hands in innumerable major Capcom projects up to and including the original Resident Evil before departing the company. Mega Man the character was designed by Akira Kitamura, but the man most associated with both game and character is Keiji Inafune, who did much of the art and character design for the first game and slowly became more involved with the games as the series progressed. The game follows the adventures of a boy robot who begins his artificial life as a lab assistant to his creator, Dr. Thomas Light. When the good doctor's other robots are stolen and reprogrammed by his rival, Dr. Albert Wily, he repurposes his assistant into a fighting robot, capable of taking other robots' unique abilities. And thus, one of the most unique concepts of the NES era was born. Take on the stages in any order and steal your enemy's weapons, using them to exploit your other enemy's weaknesses. According to MobyGames.com, since that first game's release in 1987, there have been 82 unique Mega Man titles across a variety of sub-series like the X series, the Star Force series, and the Legends series, among others, making it one of gaming's most enduring franchises. It spawned multiple cartoons, comics, video game imitators, and even at least one rock band. And despite there not having been a new Mega Man game released in several years, a dedicated fan base keeps the fire burning. So with 82 games, what are we looking at to kick things off? There's no better place than the original series on the NES. After all, there's no franchise more represented on the NES. There are 3 Super Mario games. There are 3 Ninjas Gaiden. There are 3 Castlevanias. But there are 6 Mega Man adventures. So we're going to get started with Mega Man 5 on the NES and the Game Boy. Now you might be asking, why Mega Man 5? And I hope that becomes obvious as I talk about these games. But right now, let's dive right in with Mega Man 5 on the NES, represented here on the Mega Man Legacy Collection for the PlayStation 4 because I'm not made of money. Released in late 1992 in both North America and Japan after the Super NES, but before the series made a massive leap forward on the Super NES with Mega Man X, Mega Man 5 sees Mega Man's robo-brother Proto Man turn evil. Nah, I'm just kidding. It's actually a doppelganger created by Dr. Wily. Who didn't see that coming? But said doppelganger, named Darkman... No, not that one. Though it would be cool if the evil robot in this game was played by Liam Neeson. Anyways, Darkman has 8 new robot masters at his command for Mega Man to take on. As was standard by this point, the bosses were designed by fans, and folks, I gotta be honest, the creativity well was starting to run dry by this point. The roster here is Gravity Man, Wave Man, Stone Man, Gyro Man, Star Man, no not that one, no not that one either, no not that one, no, not that one. Charge Man, who is, no joke, a train with legs, Napalm Man, and Crystal Man. Our hero, as with every installment since Mega Man 3, is joined by his trusty Robo-Dog Rush, and gifted with the ability to slide along the floor. As with the previous outing, Mega Man 4, he can charge his arm cannon to release a Mega Buster shot, although the shot is larger than in Mega Man 4. New to this installment is the Super Arrow, a somewhat redundant tool that's basically like the Rush Jet, only faster and you can't guide it up or down. It's somewhat unique in that you can shoot them against walls to create platforms, but that's only necessary a very few times. It's also somewhat predictably, given the series' history, one of the final boss's weaknesses. The other new thing is that by collecting letters that spell out Mega Man 5, 1 in each Robot Master stage, Mega Man can call on his new robo-animal buddy, Beat. Beat is a bird, and he's borderline overpowered here, because he makes the final Wily battle kind of inconsequential. He flies directly to enemies and damages them, which negates the final Wily form's height advantage and invisibility. And all of this really spotlights my issues with Mega Man 5. In an interview for the Mega Man Complete Works book, Inafune said Part 5 had a troubled development, and unfortunately that does come through in the game. There's nothing particularly innovative here. None of the boss weapons are that memorable, none of the stages feel new or exciting, and I personally have always felt that the Mega Buster's charge shot really kills the pacing of the later NES titles in the series. Also, while Mari Yamaguchi composed some truly bangin' soundtracks on the Super NES for games like UN Squadron and Super Ghouls and Ghosts, this soundtrack, her only NES credit, is fairly lacking and kind of forgettable. But all of that said, the game is not bad. None of the NES games are bad. They're just victims of the high bar set by Mega Man 2 and Mega Man 3, which are definitely classics and are in contention for some of the all-time greatest games ever made. And while the common wisdom today seems to be that the back half of Mega Man's NES output is bad, that really just doesn't hold up, and it wasn't the feeling at the time. EGM's review crew gave the game 7.75 out of 10 on average, as did Game Informer. GamePro called it deja vu all over again, but they still gave it a 4.5 out of 5. So yes, Mega Man 5 is my personal least favorite of the NES hexology, but taken on its own merits, it is a more than competent action platformer, and this most recent playthrough has really cemented that for me personally. But now let's move on to something a little more interesting. Mega Man 5, with a Roman numeral, for the Game Boy. And in Japan, this was known as Rockman World 5. Which is the version that I'm playing because, as previously mentioned, I'm not made of money. Released in 1994 in Japan, North America, and Europe, the same year as Mega Man X2 on the Super NES, Mega Man 5 bucks the trend of the earlier Game Boy titles. All of the Game Boy Mega Man games except for 2 were developed by Minakuchi Engineering, a small studio best known for developing all of the Game Boy Mega Man games, except for 2. They also did Bionic Commando on the Game Boy and Wily Wars for the Genesis, but the series they will forever be associated with is Rockman World, aka Mega Man with Roman numerals. Except for 2. This game is the only one in the series to have Super Game Boy enhancements, offering a custom color palette as well as a nifty border if you're into that. But that's not the only first and only for this game. The Game Boy titles traditionally used 4 Robot Masters from one game in the NES series and 4 from a different one. So, for example, in Mega Man 3 on the Game Boy, you have 4 Mega Man 2 bosses and 4 from Mega Man 3. But Mega Man 5 on the Game Boy scraps this to come up with new bosses. The Star Droids, 8 new Robot Masters not seen in any of the NES games. The story, of which there is quite a bit for a Mega Man game, is that the Star Droids have come to Earth to attack Mega Man and take over the planet. He's defeated at the hands of their apparent leader, Terra, and Dr. Light creates the Mega Arm, a modification of his Buster that allows him to fire his fist in order to defeat them.
I don't want to spoil the twist, but Dr. Wily sent them.
So that's one new thing. Mega Man's main weapon is a bit different, and it can be modified to grab items and do continuous damage to enemies by buying upgrades. Yeah, and that's another thing. This game, unlike any of the NES games, has items you can buy at Dr. Light's lab. Upgrades for the Mega Arm, a much needed energy distributor that automatically puts weapon energy pickups to the weapon that most need it, and other stuff like E-tanks and weapon energy tanks. You also get a new animal buddy, Tango the cat, but he's totally useless, to be honest. So in a holdover from the earlier Game Boy titles, you can only choose from 4 stages at once. To begin, you have Mercury, Neptune, Mars, and Venus. Once you defeat them, Terra pops up to make you face a variation on the classic Yellow Devil. Then you can take on Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Pluto. And I do need to point out here that Pluto is a cat, which is almost certainly an Edgar Allan Poe reference, which I mark out for. Once you defeat the first 8 Star Droids, you play a short, scrolling shooter stage, which is a cool and unique addition, and then you enter the Wily Star. And here you'll face 4 bosses from previous Mega Man Game Boy games. The Mega Man Killers, Anchor, Punk, and Ballad, and Quint. If you don't know about Quint, he is the extremely silly future Mega Man that Dr. Wily brought back from the future, gave him sunglasses and a jackhammer, and sent him against Mega Man. He's from Mega Man 2 on the Game Boy. And interestingly, the final boss you face in this game is not Wily himself, but is instead a doomsday weapon known as Sunstar.
So it's definitely a unique game, certainly more unique than its NES counterpart, which I would categorize as a comfortable iteration on a theme. Still, the uniqueness does not make the Game Boy game flawless by any means.
In spite of new bosses, it's still a Mega Man game, and the Star Droids, while they're well designed and a nice reprieve from the blank man Robot Master formula, are almost all way too easy to beat, and almost all of their weapons aren't especially useful. Some are fun to use, especially Terra's, but you don't get that particular one until the very end. Also, like the NES game, it seems to err on the easy side in general, particularly compared to Mega Man 2 and 3 on the NES, to say nothing of the original Mega Man. But the graphics are great for the system, the levels are mostly fun and surprisingly long, and the music I found more enjoyable than its NES counterpart.
While there would be one more NES adventure starring the Blue Bomber, published by none other than Nintendo in the US no less, this would be his swan song on the black and white Game Boy. There would be a Game Gear game released the following year, by US Gold if you can believe that, and after that he was silent on handhelds for a full 5 years. So, let's go ahead and do like we always do, take a look and a listen, side by side. obviously the NES game looks better, but the Game Boy title is no slouch given the hardware it's running on. And as I already said, I think the stereo soundtrack of the Game Boy is better than what's on the NES, although neither of them is bad.
And that makes it time to give the edge. And I gotta say, I don't want to trash the NES version. Like I said, it is my least favorite of the NES games, but I still think it's fun taken on its own merits. Still, I gotta give it to the Game Boy version. There's this thought that goes around that the Game Boy Mega Man games suck, and well, that's wrong. It's just wrong. Minakuchi Engineering really went above and beyond to make a fun, engaging, and surprisingly robust Mega Man experience on a handheld. And you know what? While I'm at it, their take on Mega Man 4 is pretty good too. Now, if you haven't played Mega Man 5 on either the Game Boy or the NES, I really just gotta say you should play them both. And luckily for you, they're easily accessible. Mega Man 5 for the NES is available on the Virtual Console for the Wii, Wii U, and 3DS. It's available on the Mega Man Legacy Collection for the PS4, Xbox One, Steam, and also the 3DS. It's available on the Mega Man Anniversary Collection for the PS2, GameCube, and original Xbox. It's available on the Japanese PlayStation Store for PlayStation 3, PSP, and Vita. If you want to play any of the NES Mega Man games, there are plenty of ways to do it. The Game Boy version is also currently available, but not quite in as robust of a selection. When the original Mega Man Anniversary Collection came out, there was actually an announced Game Boy Advance cart that was going to pack all 5 of the Game Boy games into one cartridge, but it was unfortunately canceled. Still, it's available now on the 3DS Virtual Console for just $4. Now, if you're looking for original carts, they're out there, but I am totally baffled given the number of ways you can play Mega Man 5 on the NES as to why it still commands a price of around $100. The Game Boy version is even more expensive than that if you want a US copy. So if you want an actual cartridge so you can check out the Super Game Boy border and the custom color palette, which are not included in the Virtual Console release, you can get a Japanese copy. That one is between $20 and $30, so it's much, much more reasonable. And that does it. Thank you so much for joining me for the first installment of the Mega Manniversary. And between myself and Roger, we have a total of 6 episodes planned. So come back later this month for the first Obscure Old Games installment in the Mega Manniversary. We hope to see you then.
敵か味方か謎のブルース率いるロボット軍団に立ち向かえ。会長ロックマンシリーズファミコン用ソフトロックマン5ブルースの罠好評発売中。ロックモードも仲間入り。カプコン